Hi everyone, welcome back to the vodcast. Today I'd like to talk about a subject which a lot of people seem to be quite confused about, and that is selfishness and obviously selflessness, and whether you can do something selfish or selfless, what is the difference, and this kind of thing. Now, it is a kind of philosophical subject. In philosophy, we call this debate psychological egoism. And this is the theory that everything human beings do is motivated by self-interest. Now, there's a little sort of wrinkle to the idea of self-interest, and that's called enlightened self-interest. And this is quite an interesting phrase in itself, isn't it? For those of us in the with spiritual interest, enlightened self-interest. So this is where someone might act in a way that seems selfless, but it's because they understand, say, the law of karma. You know, if such a law exists, sometimes called the law of compensation. So, and someone with an enlightened self-interest might help other people, knowing that that's going to come back to themselves at a later date. Or they might, from an enlightened self-interest point of view, sort of give money to charity anonymously, because they know that making the world a slightly better place will actually improve their own lives in the long run. So that's enlightened self-interest. And this starts to highlight the problem with trying to exactly differentiate between self-interest and helping other people, because there's not a strict dividing line between these two things, and that's partly because there's probably not a strict dividing line between self and other. I mean, if we just look at ourselves physically, you know, from a physical point of view only, just, you know, what we can all agree on, we are part of a physical universe. Our bodies are, at least, and we are partly dependent on that universe. So we're not an isolated self. No man or woman is an island. We are all part of this wider system. You know, without the earth I can't survive, and indeed without other human beings I wouldn't probably survive very long. We are a social animal on a physical level. We survive through cooperation, through our culture, through learning techniques, and we need other people. Most of us do anyway. I think all of us do. We need other people, especially as children. You know, we literally cannot survive for 5 minutes without somebody to look after us. So, you know, we are connected to other people, and we are partly dependent on other people. And it's in a way, those people are sometimes hidden, like the people who made this camera that I'm using now. That's not absolutely an essential part of my life, but there's thousands of people who are involved in that camera's production and design and distribution and so on. And but they're kind of hidden. So, you know, I don't actually see them doing that work for me. And obviously, you know, a little bit more essential is the people who are making sure I get clean water, people who are making sure that the supermarket doesn't run out of food, people who are making sure electricity is running through this building. Yeah. Well, they're all kind of hidden from me, but they're all there. And the whole social system that we live in is kind of slightly hidden and taken for granted and familiar, but it's all working away to make our lives possible at all. Yeah. So, you know, this separation between self and other is maybe a bit of a fantasy, really. We're part of a community physically, as animals, as a human physical body, and obviously if we go into a spiritual dimension, you know, some people would say we're literally all one consciousness. I personally wouldn't go as far as that. At least I would say yes, maybe that's true, but we're also an individual consciousness. Now that would seem like a contradiction in terms. That would seem like in the physical world you can't be this object here has got these parts on it, and so, you know, we are like that. We are a part of a bigger whole, but we are still a separate part. So I would say they're both true, that at some levels we are connected to everyone else. At other levels we are genuinely an individual and we have individual freedom. And so yeah, from a spiritual point of view, when we help other people, are we entirely helping another person, or are we actually very directly helping another aspect of ourselves at some level? And I think this is true. And of course, we also often experience good feelings helping others, and other benefits. I'll get into that later. But let's just look at a bit of the background to selfishness, or psychological egoism. It is known that there are some people who are extremely self-centered. In psychology, there's various labels for these people. Narcissist would be a good example, or narcissist personality disorder, NPD. Some would say psychopathic people. I mean, they almost don't recognise any other consciousness as existing. I think some people with severe autism display certain qualities of self-involvement, insularity. And then I suppose at the other end of the spectrum, you've got these people that just seem to be so full of love and friendliness, and, you know, perhaps the Dalai Lama might be a good example. You know, other people might look at Mother Teresa on the Christian end of things, or we all know people in our own lives that just seem to be open-hearted and take such joy in supporting other people and helping other people, and they see it as partly their mission in life. And I would say a lot of artists are like that as well. But there's all sorts of ways of giving, you know, and giving of your imagination and of your talent is another way, of course. And so I would say we've got a kind of spectrum again. And here we are, the old spectrum. And we don't really like spectrums, do we? Human beings. We like to think of things as being black and white, left and right, nice little categories all cut up. And, you know, I just recently did a video on racism. I think that's a similar situation there. We We want to put people into categories, little boxes. Makes it much easier for us to categorise them and, you know, do it that way, rather than facing up to the reality that there's a spectrum here and we're all on it. And so we've got, at one end, we've got narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathy, and at the other end we've got, you know, extremely loving people. And saints and so on. And llamas. Yeah, so there's the spectrum, we're all on there somewhere. And most of us are probably not at either of these ends. And that is because virtually every psychological trait that's been measured, and not just psychological ones, but most natural phenomenon, including human statistics of various kinds, fall into what's called the natural distribution curve. Natural distribution curve. And this is very famous in psychology, statistics, and, you know, if you look at people's foot sizes, they're like this. You've got some extremes at one end or the other. So this is like, if it was foot sizes, you've got, you know, size 2 to size 15, like this. And then in the middle you've got 9, 10, 11. Yeah, this is men, yeah? If it were women it would be a few lower, yeah? This is UK sizes. So basically, with this big hump here, is 90% of the people are sort of within this big hump, and there will be 9, 10 or 11 shoe size. And then, but you've always got some people at the other extremes, and this is the same with this spectrum, I'm sure. So most of us are here in the middle, and we're not really totally selfish, and we're not totally loving and giving people. We're somewhere in the middle. Now, if you look at intelligence IQ tests, you'll get a similar curve, and actually this is the average. This right here is 100 points on the IQ test. Yep. So most people are within, I think it's 15 points, so between 85 and 115. But then you've got the outliers like Einstein up here, and obviously people with severe mental retardation here. I'm not sure if that's a politically correct term. Special, very special. And so you've got this distribution curve in almost every psychological trait. And in fact it's so common that if something that's being a natural thing that's being tested, including human psychology or human attributes, doesn't come out roughly on this curve, people get a bit suspicious. There are some things that don't come out like this, but vast majority do. And this is the basis for a lot of psychology, that you can actually, if you can get a few results on this curve, you can make the curve. Yeah? So as long as you're fairly sure it's a natural distribution, if you get a few data points, you can make the whole curve. And this allows you to get a lot of knowledge very quickly, as you can see. But that's a bit of an aside. Let's get back to selfishness. So this is the truth, I think. And on this spectrum, obviously we're not at any particular point on the spectrum. More like we cover a kind of range. So let's say from here to here is my range. Some would say it goes a lot further this way, but this is just an example. Okay, so on this range, I am functioning in my life like when I'm really tired and, you know, angry or something like that, I'm getting way down here on this range. And, you know, when I'm in a really good mood, I've had plenty of sleep, nice food, you know, I'm getting up here towards this range. Yeah, and probably again we've got our natural distribution curve. It would probably describe how much time I spend at each part of these ranges, and so most of the time I'll be in the middle here. And so you could say in a way that there is a point like equivalent to this 100 points on the IQ test that basically describes this hump, the tip of the hump of my selfishness to unselfishness, or to use psychological terms, altruism scale. I don't know what the other end would be called, but you know, there is a point that describes that average place, and of course that point will be moving around during my life. So this would be on one day, or perhaps we could say 1 week, but you know, that point will be moving up and down this spectrum throughout my life, and hopefully overall it will be moving, let's hope, towards this end. You know, we're getting more, that hump is more and more moving down this spectrum, and moving more and more towards, you know, being more loving and considerate of other people and so on. Now, a lot of people, one misconception that I've heard a lot of people seem to be under is that if you get something out of helping someone else, then suddenly helping them is a selfish act. And I think just me saying that surely must make some people reconsider that. You know, just the way I've just described this whole complexity of what human psychology and probably this particular trait is. You know, it really isn't sensible to categorise an action as either selfish or selfless. Like, most of them are going to contain elements of both. Just to give you an example, you know, if I see someone begging for money and I give them money, sure, there might be an element of assuaging a certain amount of guilt. You know, I see my fellow human being there obviously suffering, and you know, that makes me feel sad and a bit guilty that, you know, I have so much and they have so little, you know. So I think, well, and that does assuage some of that negative feeling. But also there's some element of selflessness there, because I could have assuaged it in another way. You know, I could have just blocked them out of my mind. A lot of people do that. You know, I've actually had experience of begging, and this many years ago, and a lot of people just don't even see you, apparently, and I'm pretty sure they don't. I'm pretty sure they really don't see you. They ignore you, unconsciously probably. So that's another way of dealing with that guilt. There's, you know, another way as well, which is perhaps even less loving, and that would be to be angry with the person for causing you to feel that guilt. So causing you. So, you know, I've seen that as well. It's a lot rarer, and again, you know, that's going back to that distribution curve. You would see that. And again, you know, depending on where people are on their own range, and you know, where they are in that particular part of their life, they might overlap into that area where they might be angry with the person, might tell them off and say, why are you begging here, you're just sitting in the road, why don't you get a job or something, yeah? That is clearly a more selfish and less loving way to deal with the situation, I would say. But is it completely unloving? Well, no, I don't think it is, because you're still talking to the person, you're still recognising them, you're actually offering them some advice, which isn't too bad, you know, probably. So there is I think there's an element of selflessness even in that, which might appear to be quite unloving, quite extremely unloving, especially to the person who's experiencing it. But, you know, looking more objectively, there's an element of perhaps even love going on there. It's twisted and hidden and a bit broken perhaps, but and I think this is what we see in general with human behaviour, is this kind of mixture. And so I think this idea that if you get any kind of selfish benefit from helping someone else, that makes your whole motivations selfish, is very oversimplified and a bit strange, a bit odd. And I must admit, I do wonder if people who are drawn to that idea are quite low down on the altruism scale that I was talking about before. And perhaps they have that motivation to try and believe that most people are there as well. I also wonder whether they've experienced love, because that for me is the ultimate experience of this kind of overlapping of self and other. Because when you love someone, their interests and their happiness are almost indistinguishable from your own. You can obviously you do have a bit more objectivity, and if you want to, you can kind of withdraw from their interest and their perspective and their feelings. But of course you don't want to. You know, that's part of the joy of it, is to be so connected to someone else. And yeah, so I do wonder if people who have this problem of seeing the selflessness in a lot of human behaviour, whether they really haven't experienced love or haven't experienced it recently. I think when you do, it's fairly obvious that this overlap between self and other is much more complex than if you just look at a physical body and from a scientific point of view and just say, well, that's you and that's separate. No, certainly not in our psychology. And even a particular football team or a particular vehicle, my car, or that can become part of me, and if somebody scratches that car, actually feel it on your own heart, or if that football team or whatever it is, loses, that can actually affect people very strongly psychologically. So the self is much more flexible, much more broad than that, and maybe even it encompasses everything at some level. So the one specific thing I've often heard is that, and I'd like to really deal with, and this is what I've been leading up to with this video, is the idea that... sorry, the video's gone on a bit long there, the camera stopped. The idea is that I really want to deal with is, if the action makes you feel better, you know, the action helping someone else, you feel better because of it, that therefore that makes that action a selfish action. And what I'd specifically like to point out is that it doesn't, because like I pointed out before, there's a complexity to our behaviour, and there are selfish and unselfish things in everything we do. But and there's this overlap between self and other, you know, which makes it even more complex. But if we just take this one sort of example, and I remember a Friends episode where, I don't know if you've ever seen it, you know, that great comedy series, and there was Phoebe, and she had a bet with Joe, I think his name's Joey, you know. She had a bet with him that she could do something unselfish, and during the whole show this was sort of a running thing, and you know, in the end she couldn't, because it kept making her feel good, and she couldn't find a way to help someone else without feeling good. And of course, this, I just think that's wrong. I think the very fact that helping someone else make somebody feel good is the unselfishness. That is the sign of unselfishness. Because I don't think someone with NPD or psychopathy is going to feel good helping someone else. You know, and so for me that is the definition of that level of lovingness, that that you take joy in someone else's joy and happiness in someone else's happiness. And so it seems very strange to me that that should be seen as a sign of selfishness, because for me that is the ultimate sign of lovingness, and therefore a recognition of the connection between ourselves and other people, and a celebration of that. So in a way it's love. It is love, and love is a wonderful thing that when you give it, it builds in you. It's not like other things. When you give them, they reduce in you. I'm trying to think what that would be. If you gave blood, you've got less blood in you. Yeah. But if you give love, you have more love to give, and you have more love inside you. It seems to increase your own self-love. Yeah, love grows, builds with love, and when you're given love, it doesn't take love from you. It gives you love. It builds love in you as well. It's a very unusual property that love is like that. That we can give it, and it gives joy to other people. It gives happiness and health and truth and every good thing. It gives other people that, and it also builds it in us at the same time. And so it's pretty unique in that way. Even information, you give it, it doesn't cost you anything, but it doesn't give you anything really, normally, unless it's given with love. And then sometimes you can have a greater understanding of that information by giving it. But if I just sort of send you a computer program, you know, it hasn't cost me anything, but hasn't probably given me anything either. So that's a property of love, and I don't think that that it can be called selfish. It transcends self and other. It transcends that whole idea, and it's about connection. And so that's what I'd like to finish on. And I wish you all love. Bye for now.